All right, welcome to Fireside Flashbacks. This week's guest was a former counselor, sports and out-tripping coordinator, and program director all through the years of 1992 through to 97. So please help me and give a warm Fireside welcome to Montana. Hey, how are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you, Pam?
I'm great. So back at camp, you started in 92, which happened to be the year I was born. So a little bit of time ago.
A little bit of time has passed since then.
Yeah, so there's a lot of gaps to fill up from 97 to present, but what have you been up to since leaving camp?
My last summer at Camp 97, I graduated from Mount Allison University, and I, in between that and going overseas for a year just to hang out in London, I actually worked in Fredericton as a human services counselor, so there was a direct application there in my very first job as an adult, full-time job, with using the skills that I had learned at Camp Rotary. So I did that. I was mainly a counselor for a young woman with autism. And so every morning I would go over to her house and we would spend the day together, and we'd do activities like activities of daily living that I hope we still call those here. So I would assist her in her activities of daily living, and we'd go out and do our little walks in Odell Park, or sometimes we'd go downtown. So that was the first thing I did, and then went away for a year, came back and had a job for 2 years at Easter Seal Marcia Dimes, running a project called Volnet. Which was helping nonprofits around New Brunswick get set up with their first computer and their first internet connection. So I'm dating myself a lot. Even after camp, anything I did in the first 10 years after camp is going to sound really ancient, because that's when the internet was first becoming a thing. And then from there, I have been working for the provincial government since then. I worked for the Department of Post-Secondary Education, Training and Labor, helping community adult learning centers. And then for the past 10 years, I've been working for the Tourism, Heritage and Culture branch in culture, actually, funding film companies in New Brunswick. So when they want to film a television series or a movie in New Brunswick, I help them find a little bit of money to do that.
Excellent, that's awesome. So what made you start working at camp? We kind of talked about what you did after camp. So what kind of
I'm from Grand Falls. I'm from Drummond, actually, which is a little teeny tiny place outside of Grand Falls, New Brunswick. And I remember in the summer of 92, I had high hopes of becoming a lifeguard at the pool there, and that didn't work out. I applied for a job. I didn't get the job as the lifeguard. And there were a couple of people in Grand Falls at my high school who were working at Camp Rotary, and they said, well, you should apply for a job at camp. It's down on Grand Lake, that's outside of Fredericton, and it's a really wonderful place, and they're looking for people, and they love counselors who can speak French or who are French, so that they can help with the Francophone campers.
We definitely still do.
So my twin sister and I, her camp name is Lune, she and I applied for a job here, and we got it, and so it was our first summer ever away from home. And so we came here, we did our 3-day staff training. We were hired, and that first summer at camp was nuts. There were a lot of things that we did back then that probably have changed since then. So that's how I arrived at camp, and we loved it. It was so hard. It was really hard work. It still is hard work.
It's still every day has its different challenges. We like to say there's different hurdles, and you just need to get over the first hurdle, and then you're on to the next one. So working with your sister, so actually I worked here in 2014 with my stepbrother. I convinced my stepbrother to apply. And then at another camp, I convinced my stepsister to apply. But never one of my direct siblings I had work with me here. So working with your sister Lune, what was that like?
It was a lot of fun, and I have to give a lot of credit to the staff at camp back then. And they were a lot like probably the teachers that we had when we were growing up in school. I seem to remember Lune and I were very rarely in the same cabin, and I think that was a conscious decision back then on the part of the staff to make sure that we had our own experience. I mean, you're never far from anyone at camp, so I always had, Lynn and I always saw each other all the time, every day, during our spare time, at program, blah, 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 blah. But I do believe the senior staff back then felt it was important, and they were right, for Lynn and Montana to forge their own identities as counselors, and as camp staffers. But I think, like, to anyone else who was around back then, we would have been very, 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 very similar in our styles of counseling, of interacting with other camp staffers. We spent all our spare time together. Like, if there was a 2-day break, it was very rare that Lynn and I were not on the same 2-day break together. Enough, but it happened. Like, she would go off with some camp staffers sometimes, and I might go visit friends or a guy I was dating, like, somewhere not at camp during a break. But so that's and the times we were in cabins together, we were a great team. When we became head staff, it was a little different because we'd have these. Oh, I remember one fight we had our first summer here, I think, over the last towel in the Come Clean. And we were, back then, we would work 13-day stretches without a break, but you would get a 24-hour break somewhere in there. And if you were scheduled for the last 24-hour break in that 13-day period, you were tired. By the time the Rotarians were coming to pick you up to take you into the city for 24 hours. So she and I had asked to have the same 24-hour break together. We went into the Come Clean. There was only one clean towel left. And I got it first. And then we had this huge, huge fight. It was so immature over who got to use that towel. It was a legendary, like, people out in center field could hear us, like, hollering at each other. It's the only major dust up I ever remember us having. Every other time, like, we worked great together as counselors when we were in the same camp, as staff as well. When we were head staff or program coordinators, we always had a great time together.
Well, that's good that the only one was about a towel. Luckily we have.
That's how precious.
Luckily we have our staff bring their own towels. So
that's really smart. It probably cuts down on a lot of water use.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. And then, back then it was just, that was funny. Like, a towel was like gold.
Yeah.
It was really, if you found a clean towel, especially near the end of a session, you could almost auction that thing off and pay for your tuition at university.
Oh,
That's how precious a clean towel was.
Wow. So what's something you truly miss about camp?
I miss. And you know what? It's funny because we're living a pandemic time now where you can't move around as much or go to as many places as you want. For me, what it's been a lot like a summer at camp. And I remember when I worked here, every summer was like you were stepping out of that universe over there, and I'm pointing to, like, the universe that's across the lake, the outside world, and you were entering a universe that was very much its own little center. And so I miss the isolation of camp and the bonds that being placed in an environment with people who have very special needs, who need you and you need them. And I'm talking about staff and campers alike. It helps you forge a bond and a dependency on other staff and on the cabins and the shelter and the daily shower that's very intimate. It's very simple. I like, it was a very simple, live in the moment kind of life. And I also miss the analog type of life you live here. We didn't have the internet.
No, we have it now.
Yeah, I know you do now. But my generation, which is Generation X and everyone who comes, but we were the last generation to know what an analog life was like a totally unconnected life. And camp was that kind of disconnected life, live in the here and now, tenfold compared to what we know now. So I miss that. And living in isolation or just having a lot of connectedness and go around stuff taken off our plates over the last few months during the pandemic has reminded me a lot of what a summer at camp was like, and I kind of love that.
Yeah.
So I want to tell everybody who's felt like maybe discombobulated by that, it's actually a really good thing. Make sure you relish it, because there's, there might not be a time again where you get to savor that live in the nowness that being at camp is.
Awesome. And, without using names, what would you say is one of your favorite camper stories?
My favorite, I think it would be, and this is top of mind because I actually had a chance to see one of my favorite campers of all time again in the past few months. I ran into her just after Christmas in Fredericton, and I recognized her right away. And we're talking 30 years here. It's almost 30 years since I've seen, she's a woman now, an adult just like I am. And I think she had so many intense direct needs. She was only 7 years old when she came to camp. And she needed a lot of help and a lot of attention. And I was a 15 and a half year old, like back then high school students were hired at camp. And I had never left Grand Falls, and I had never been responsible for someone's well-being like that. And her parents sent a letter to camp, and it was very detailed about what her needs were and what we had to, and that letter was like my Bible for the next 6 or 7 days. And we forged a very, very strong bond. And I remember, it was great. It was very, very hard helping her out. I almost became like her one-on-one counselor. She needed someone with her all the time so that she was safe, but could still participate in all the activities at camp. And it was really harrowing and intense for me, because her parents, she'd never left home before, and her parents were taking this huge leap of faith in letting her come live somewhere else for seven days and give it a try. And so she and I became like this for 7 days, and we learned a lot. And I will never, never forget like how hard that was, but also how empowering that was. Like I became a much better person after spending a week with this person and helping her out, and us like being together at camp for that week.
Oh, that's awesome. That makes me immediately think of my first year at camp. As a counselor, I had a parent come up and do the same thing. They said, "Hey, this is you have my son in your cabin. Here's a book with everything you need to know." And that book was studied every single night by every single staff member, just to confirm that we had everything. And we were just like, "Oh no, what do we do in this situation? It's in the book." And, and
go to the letter.
For a couple of years, I know that parent added to the book based off camp, as they found out how their child kind of evolved at camp. And then now from my understanding, the book no longer comes because there's so many people who know this camper, and they're able to help out, and it's really great. They were back again last summer, and coming ever since that first summer in 2011. So and imagine how great that person's parents must feel, right? Because that's one thing I think people don't appreciate enough about camp. Well, the people who know camp and work here, we know how important camp is for the parents of the kids who come here, because they are taking a huge leap of faith. 51 weeks of the year, like the parents are always with these kids, and they provide for their needs all the time. So it can be hard, like saying, "Here you go for a week, please take care of this person." But for those parents, it brings them, a week of rest as well. And it provides that camper with a chance to just see something different, and become, grow. For sure. So that's another thing that I miss very much about that camp. It's incredibly exciting. Camp. I know my family, my niece is autistic, and this year was supposed to be her first year.
It will happen for her.
But
I'm sure of it.
Yeah, so we're, I'm very excited for that, and I think my sister was saying it's such a relief knowing that you're there. I'm not working directly with her, but I'm able to go help if there's something that kind of escalates, so to speak. Uncle Panel comes in. And
and she might be like, "Who's Panel? That's your uncle so and so."
Yeah, who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
So, what is some advice you'd wish to give your younger self or any new staff coming into camp for the first time?
Okay. Well, and I love when we had that tour of the cabins earlier on that I saw that life, you still have to fit your life in a cubby hole. That's a really, really great skill. So the advice I would give my younger self and anybody who's coming to camp for the first time is socks. If you're going to bring extra of anything, make it socks. Make it underwear. Like, don't bring just enough of those things. Bring more of those things that you think you need. Anything else you can find. Oh, good sneakers is probably good, and a good raincoat, right? You should be able to have, I would say, have a 10-day supply of those. I'm not getting all philosophical here. Like, I'm just what's practical? Everything else you should be able to, one t-shirt, 2 t-shirts is fine. I'm trying to think, like, you'll get stuff when you get here. Like, I wore this, this is my staff sweatshirt from 1992, by the way. And laundry does happen often, and you're not even going to care, actually.
We don't do the staff laundry here anymore.
Oh, okay.
No.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks.
But I mean, just bring enough socks, bring enough underwear, because you never know when something's going to happen to laundry and you might need a little bit more of those. You'll be thankful you have clean versions of those.
Fair.
Everything else, you'll be able to wear 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and you'll be fine.
Excellent. And you held the position of counselor for 2 years, sports and out-tripping coordinator for 2 years, and program director for 1. Was there a position that you didn't get to experience at camp that you would wish you got?
I'm trying to think. Like, I don't recall ever wanting to be the camp director, because that to me was it was such a huge responsibility. I was really, really happy that I stuck around long enough to make it to head staff and just to see things. Just to see things from their point of view, because I'm sure it still happens now. If you're a counselor, like it or not, at night after all the campers are in bed, and counselors kind of, do we still have light? Anyway.
I think we're fine.
Counselors like, head staff, they don't know, what's going on here in the weeds and blah, blah, blah. And I was always interested in finding out, like, what do head staff say about the counselors up there in the, on the second floor of the house. So I was glad that I got an opportunity to make it at least a head staff to see things from that point of view, what it takes to organize camp before anyone even arrives, like the supplies, the planning, the camper lists, the registration. So I feel like I got to where I wanted to get, and that tells you how much I loved it too. Yeah. Like, most people will come to camp and they'll stay here for 2 or 3 years, and then they might move on to another summer job, depending on what their interests are. Camp meant so much to me. I wanted to work here as long as I could, before I finished university and moved on to something else. So I was really happy about that.
Yeah, and it's always fun, because I remember being that staff member being like, like, what are they doing upstairs?
Yeah.
It's like, now I am the person upstairs. It's like, what am I not doing right now?
Exactly.
But there is a lot of behind the scenes stuff that I think staff tend to forget needs to happen for everything at camp to happen, and it's great to allow people and get those people who are passionate about returning to camp and have them on the kind of the other side of the office door, so to speak. I know this past year, our individual filming Quill, he joined me for the pre-camp season in the spring, and I just kept throwing stuff at him, and he was like, "This has to happen before camp." And it's like, yeah, like this and these 15 other things I need you to do by Friday.
Yeah. I remember that. I remember that. We have so much to do.
And so it is quite exciting, and it's always neat to speak to individuals who worked on the leadership team or resource team, and them always saying, I remember as a counselor saying, what do they do upstairs? You know? And it's always funny because then you work upstairs and you're like, oh, okay, I was wrong.
and seeing things from, like, there were a couple of things that happened in the 90s in the camp that required some pretty big, serious decision making on the part of, like, you know, the people who were upstairs in the house. You know, a flu came to camp one summer. You know,
96.
96.
I've been told about the 96 flu.
The 96 flu that, you know, that shut camp down for a couple of days, and you know, or a big change in the culture here at camp. You know, camp is in some sense, and I'm about to say something and be like, that was allowed at camp. Like, we used to be able to smoke at camp. That was allowed. And I was here for
the 90s.
I know. I was here the year we decided that there was no more smoking. Like, you wouldn't smoke in front of the campers, but you could go smoke on the beach or smoke, you know, at designated areas. And I was here when camp became a non-smoking, you know, kept up with the times and became, and you would not believe, you know, how hard that was, you know, that culture shift for a lot of people. So there was a very strong reaction because smoking back then is something you did to cope with stress and your fatigue and things like that. And we know that there are plenty of those that happened at camp. So a lot of people were thrown off, but what am I going to do if I get stressed out? And so head staff had to help people and counselors like navigate that big cultural shift, and they did a great job.
Awesome. And, you know, one kind of final two-part question for you. Do you have a favorite camp song?
Yep. I don't know if you sing it here anymore. It was called Ueli. And it was one of the few French songs that we sang at Campfire.
I don't think so. Do you want to perform it for us? That's part two.
No, it would be offensive. Like, it was a song that had indigenous components to it. Okay. And back then we were like, oh yeah, we'll just, you know, this song's in the book, we'll just sing it. I do remember the words, but I'm like, you know what? That today is cultural appropriation. Okay. So that's, you know, and that's one way that camp has evolved, and that summer camps have evolved, is they're a lot more sensitive to these things now, and I think that's really, really a good thing.
Yeah, and I think it's important that camps
it's still one of my favorite songs because the melody was really, really beautiful. Yeah, and it was a great song. It was a call and repeat song, so it was fun to sing, you know, from that perspective. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Montana, those are all the questions I have for you today. You know, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
To the folks at home, if you have any questions you want me to ask our guests, please email connect@camprotary.ca, and we will see you next time on Fireside Flashback.